I want to reward everyone who showed up on time. Thank you guys, and thank you for being here and saying yes to this subject matter. It's like one of the most important subjects that I feel we can immerse ourselves in at this time, because so much of the change that we wish to see on this planet, and I'm just going to make a broad umbrella assumption that all of you want to see a similar change on this planet, which is to shift from the suffering, the disconnection, the victimhood into creatorship, into joy and expansion and tribe and community and sustainability and deep, profound love and connection to the planet herself. If that's your jam, I'm assuming that's why you're here and that's what called you in to this frequency. Then in order for us to create that world, which we are already doing, but in order for us to anchor that into manifestation, right? Because it begins here, it begins in our awareness, in our hearts, in our minds, in our little personal circles, in our little personal bubbles, and then it starts to spread into our personal businesses, and eventually it starts to, that grid, it's literally like a grid of light, it starts to expand and it starts to become the blueprint or the template for the new paradigm, for the new earth that we are imagineering ourselves into. And we are literally using our belief systems, our emotions, our visions, our conversations, and the actions that we take to make this a reality, not just for ourselves in our little bubbles, but for the entire planet. And there is no reason in this age of information why we should not be able to spread this information, this light, this love, and these resources to every single person on the planet. I was in Tanzania helping build some clean water wells with a nonprofit called EPIC, Everyday People Initiating Change. And I was astounded because we were going into these villages completely off the grid. No paved roads, no, plumbing or even really toilets, just holes in the ground, no electricity, people living in huts literally made out of sand and or mud rather. And there was like the token person in the village that had a flip phone that had access to the internet. And so they had Facebook accounts. And I mean, they never saw a landline, but they went straight to Facebook. You know what I mean? And it's wild because it actually shows us that information is power, and the ability to spread information right now it's at our fingertips, literally. And so being so clear with how that information spreads and what it is that we spread, and using it as a tool, using this technology as a tool to connect us, truly connect us, rather than disconnect us further. That is the game right now. And so how does money and all of that factor into this? Well, in order for us to have the impact that we want to have, whether it's in our personal businesses, in a one-on-one dynamic with another person, or it's on a much larger global scale, we are going to have to understand how to receive resources of all kinds and filter them through our vessel, through our system, and then put them out into the world. And that is the way that we have been conditioned in our culture, in our society, is we've actually only been given one small percentage of that puzzle. We've been given the very masculine oriented, structure oriented, output oriented, this is how you create change, this is how you have an impact, this is how you have success, this is what success looks like, right? We have a very narrow definition of what that is and what that looks like. And the way that we are taught how to attain that is to take external action and to focus all of our energy on the output, right? And so that makes sense, right? Because as most of you likely are aware, most of the imbalance that we're experiencing environmentally, socially, economically is due to this imbalance between the masculine and the feminine, the energy out and the energy in, the masculine being energy out, the feminine being energy in. And so with the feminine being repressed and the masculine, the wounded masculine, and I want to really be clear to create that distinction, because it's not the masculine in itself, and it's really important to not vilify the masculine even further than we already have, but it's important to recognize that there's a lot of wounding within the masculine, and the wounded masculine has been showing up very predominantly in our collective consciousness. And all of us essentially are still running programming of wounded masculine that says, in order for me to get something, I have to do things, I have to take action, I have to sacrifice, my life a lot of times in order to achieve that certain level of success. And so we celebrate the hustle, and we celebrate the grind, and we find ways to empower ourselves in that. And yes, there will be times where you are going to take a shit ton of action, and it's going to pour through you, and you're going to create, right? You're going to be in full on, like, I've been on a roll right now, and I've been getting up. I got up at 3:30 a.m. the other day. I was so inspired. I couldn't sleep. And I was on my computer till like 8 a.m. just channeling through this entire brand book. And, that is the kind of action that I want all of you to be taking, is the kind of action where you can't not do it. Not the kind of action where you're like, man, I really need to look at my to-do list and like force myself to sit down and do these list items, because otherwise I'm not going to ever get what I want. It's a totally different energy, and it doesn't work as well because inspiration is magnetic. Okay. And that's another piece of the feminine puzzle, is the magnetism, right? So just like the womb receives and magnetizes towards her the sperm to create life, the feminine is magnetic in her power. She is the receiver, and she opens herself to receive that which is flowing in, and she's constantly allowing that flow to come in and spill out, come in and spill out. And so if any of you are familiar with the toroidal field, or the toroid, and if you aren't and you want to see a visual of that, I recommend watching, there's the first 5 minutes of a documentary on YouTube called Thrive, which is a very, very well-known documentary. And they have a beautiful animation for the toroidal field in the beginning, and pretty much the whole documentary is about this scientifically proven phenomenon that everything in the universe follows the same principle of flowing in and out and replenishing. And so we are actually literally designed to self-replenish. We don't actually need all of the shit that we've been told that we need in order to thrive. Literally. We have the ability through our breath, through our connection to the earth, and through our relationship to food and our understanding of frequency and vibration, to thrive with almost nothing. And from that place, when we realize that we are sovereign in that place, that's when we truly become empowered to create. And then we can decide, how big does my container want to be? Do I want to have millions of dollars to steward, right? But to me, my relationship to money has been a lot less about, this is my money in my bank account for my personal things. Like, the more that I've stepped into this path of service, the less I want things. Honestly, like, things aren't even that exciting to me right now. What's exciting to me is being able to channel resources through the vessel that I am, and be the sacred steward of large sums of money and other resources, so that I can start to pour those and direct those towards the people and the places that are most in alignment with what I believe the planet needs, which is tools for how to heal ourselves from coming through literally lifetimes and generations of trauma. And that's where we're at right now. And it's not wrong or bad. It's all part of the journey. And I believe that on a bigger, if we zoom out and we look at the bigger picture, we chose to experience all of that trauma and all of that disconnection because it was going to give us that incentive to awaken and to truly understand who and what we are. So how does this relate to not free? That's kind of the subject of this video, right? And of this webinar. At least that's what got you to sign up. And here I am ranting and raving about, we're going to change the world. But it's all part of it. So no such thing as free is such an important thing to understand. And just so you know, for those of you who maybe don't know me as well, I am pretty much at this point surrendered to the instructions from the divine, however you want to define that, whether you want to call that the universe or God or spirit or everything that is, or nature. It's all the same thing. It's just different words to describe the same infinite, ancient intelligence that I believe governs all of existence. And that intelligence is working through me now to a degree where there is no more questioning it. I'm just the vessel, and I listen, and I am doing the work necessary on my end to make sure that the information I'm receiving is coming through as clearly as possible. Because initially, when I would receive a vision or a message and I would translate it through my channel was still very clogged. It was still there was a lot of distortion running there still because of the food I was eating, the people I was hanging out with, the cigarettes I was smoking, the content I was watching, my own fears and belief systems and limitations and stored trauma in my body. All of that is going to imprint on whatever I create, right? So the cleaner I can be in all of those areas, the more potently and eloquently and joyfully I can translate that vision, whatever it is, into manifestation. And as an entrepreneur and an artist and someone who really has never subscribed to the status quo in any way, shape, or form, I had to really renegotiate my relationship to money in a way that forced me to face off with like the deepest levels of scarcity consciousness and root chakra fears around survival, and allowing myself to feel that and move through that in increments. It's like I couldn't actually take all of it at once. I had to chew my way through it over a couple of years. This concept of nothing actually ever being free was probably one of the most profound pieces that I am excited to share with you today. And so essentially, a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, spirituality or being of service or wanting to make a positive change, that should be free. That should just come from the heart, right? And that belief system is tethered to this very prevalent disconnect between spirituality and money. And this idea that money is the root of all evil, right, which is something that we all have heard at some point in our experience, and yet at the same time we're being conditioned and programmed to chase money, and money is God. So we are at war with ourselves because those two things cannot exist in the same space. They are contradictions. And so especially if we're walking a path of wanting to support other people in their expansion and wanting to be in service to something greater, we run into this roadblock with money. And this concept of free is very interesting, right? Because you hear people who, everywhere you look, like if you look at your junk mail and you pick up, you just glance at it, you'll see that oftentimes on the coupons, like the biggest fonts are the ones that are like half off, or buy one get one free, and the free is like 10 times as big as all the other fonts on the page. We are conditioned to want things to be free. And if we have to pay for something, as we hold that in our collective belief system as something that is being taken away from us against our will, or it's something that we have to do but we don't want to do. Like, even if you see someone make a mistake and you say, oh, you're really going to have to pay for that mistake, the way we use the word pay is literally as punishment. That is the correlation. And so if we really look at this concept of free, and you could say, and I've heard people say, well, like nature is just gives freely, right? Like you could walk up to an apple tree and you could pick the apple and it would be free. Like you don't have to pay for that. And it's true, there's no financial energy exchange that happens there. But if you're looking at how that apple actually manifested, that apple is not free. It came from somewhere, right? There's a finite amount of energy in the universe, and that energy is constantly being recycled. So in order for that apple to exist, sunlight had to be used and converted, water had to be used, oxygen, the nutrients in the soil, all the whole ecosystem that supported that tree to even be able to live in the first place. And once all of those things are there, and that energy is flowing in a symbiotic, harmonious relationship, now the apple can give as many trees as it wants, right? And even if those trees drop on the ground and no one eats those trees, well, they're going to be decomposed and they're going to be turned into something else. So there's never any waste. Everything is constantly being used in effectively in nature, and everything is being circulated and everything is being replenished. And we as a species, human beings, are really the only ones who don't do that. Like, we are actually acting as a parasite right now on this planet. We are taking more than we are giving, and we are, because of our distortion and our misunderstanding of energy and the circulation of energy and the feminine receiving component, we are trying to create a sense of safety within ourselves through external reflection. So this idea of being safe in the world is often tethered to how much money is in my bank account, right? And that your feeling of being safe in the world is deeply connected to usually how much money you have in your account. There's very few people who have $0 in their account and are like, I feel totally safe and completely taken care of in the world. And so that has been part of my journey, is getting to that place. And with that intention, of course, the universe has also given me exactly what I asked for and have brought me back down to zero several times. And every single time I went through it, the fear lessened a little bit, because in the end, I was always okay, even if it looked like shit was hitting the fan and I wasn't going to be able to pay my rent. So I see there's a couple chats here, a couple people giving us some love. Yes, there will be a recording of this, so I will be sharing that link. And yeah, people just, oh, thank you guys, just giving some love. And if you have any questions specifically around anything I'm saying, please type it in now, because I could just keep flowing and flowing and flowing. But I also really enjoy questions, and I like having that back and forth. It allows me to activate and access other parts of this information that's coming through. So while you guys are thinking about any particular questions, I want to talk a little bit about the connection between food and money. And some of you may have seen my most recent Facebook Live. I went into an ayahuasca ceremony, and my intention was to renegotiate my relationship to food and to money. And I've done a lot of this already, so this was not a brand new subject for me. In fact, a big part of my awakening process and journey started with food. It started with the recognition that I was using food as a way to punish myself, as a way to disconnect, as a way to numb, as a way to distract. And I was at war with my body, and food had the power. It had the power over me. I was not sovereign in my relationship to food. And so it was that beginning stages of my awakening where I started to really take that on and reprogram myself and heal myself and love myself through that process, instead of using, self-loathing as my source of motivation, which is what I had been doing, shifting that to self-love and truly like moving through the pain of being at war in the very vessel that I'm inhabiting, and I don't know how many of you can relate to that, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so it was actually, I was working with some sexual healers, and they were the ones that opened me up to this concept, which now is so obvious, but essentially food, money, and sex, sexual energy, are all the same thing. These are just different words to describe the same thing. So I'll give you examples of this. If I use the apple example and I take the apple off the tree and I eat the apple, now I've received the energy of that apple. I've received calories that I can now repurpose. I can use that resource and I can flow it out into the world however I choose with my personal free will. I can choose to write an email. I can choose to go for a walk. I'm using that energy resource to do something. Same is true with money. If someone writes me a check, I can buy a house. I can take someone out to lunch. I have choice through that energy that has been accumulated that I can repurpose, right? And sex is the most perfect example because it's literally how we make other humans. We use sexual energy and we come together, masculine, feminine, and life happens miraculously. And so it's really helpful. For me, it was really helpful to see the correlation between these three things, because if there's an imbalance in one area, then there's an imbalance in all areas. Everything touches everything. Nothing is ever separate. So your relationship to food is giving you insight into your relationship to money and into sex. And usually a lot of people start with food. That's often where the journey begins. And then often it will lead into money. And then often sex is kind of like the final frontier, because it's a really intense, sexual healing is one of the most profoundly intense experiences I've ever had in my life. Because we carry so much imprinting, literally, in those areas. And to start to move through those is the willingness, like opening Pandora's box and allowing yourself to feel everything you've accumulated over many lifetimes. But that's a whole nother webinar. So for me, and most recently, this has been very prevalent in my experience. It's like when I took this intention into this medicine journey, I knew going in that it wasn't going to be fun. Like I could feel the resistance in my system that was coming to the surface. That was like, ugh. Like, do you really want to do this? Like, you could totally just hang out and like keep eating your whole grain farmer's market bread and I'm like eating well, I'm eating healthy, I'm eating in moderation. I have a lot of energy. Overall, I feel great. Like money's coming in. It's not like everything is fine. You just leave it, right? But my higher self was like beckoning me and was like, yo, there's another level of this game. Like, you want to play? You really want to play this game? Like, let's see what's on the other side of this resistance. And so it was fascinating because my body, it was like my mind made the choice to say yes to untethering myself from that deep, deep belief that I need food to survive, which is just as tethered to I need money to survive. And if you look at it biologically, you could say, well, of course you need food to survive. Like, that's normal, right? Everyone needs food to survive. But that's actually not proven. There are people who have, especially, enlightened masters who have time and time again shown us that we can live off of prana and we can live off of light. Not that we necessarily all should go and be breatharians. Like, don't get me wrong, I love food and I enjoy eating it. But there's a difference between needing something and choosing something. I'm going to say that again. There's a difference between needing something and choosing something. So when I'm making the choice to put something into my body, whatever I'm putting into my body is vibrating at a certain frequency. And again, like, this is getting away from all good, bad, right, wrong. You should be vegan. You should be raw. You should not do this. You shouldn't have gluten ever. Like, none of that I resonate with. It's not about right or wrong, good or bad. It's simply about what is the vibration of the thing? And is it vibrating at the frequency that you would like to vibrate at? It's just that simple. Sometimes that's going to be, for some people, that's going to be red meat. Like my partner, Adam, right now is activating a lot of his like ancient, primal, masculine, divine masculine energy, which he's been so disconnected from due to just a lifetime of domestication, right? Which is most of us are completely domesticated at this point. And so he's been like doing vision quests and going and spending time on the land and like learning how to make fire and really activating this primal ancient wisdom. And he has, part of what he's receiving from his higher self is eat meat. And he's been, vegan and all the things. And he's honoring that. And that's what his body needs right now, because that's part of the journey that he's in. So really getting away from these labels and this like one size fits all thing, because it's not the case. We're all individual. We're all in a very unique place in our evolution, and it's constantly evolving. So for me, my journey was about facing off with my addiction to grains, because there's a deep, deep addiction there and it's like I resisted calling it an addiction because I felt like it was serving me in so many ways, and I was experiencing so much joy from it and having like amazing breakfasts with my friends in Germany. We'd go to the bakery and we'd get all the things and it'd be so delicious, and sort of ignoring the fact that after that I would need a nap to recover. It was a lot of joy that I got from that. And eventually it just sort of got to the point where I know what it feels like and what it tastes like to eat that piece of pizza, or to have that croissant, or to, and really indulge, and like indulge not from a place of guilt or feeling shameful about it, but truly indulge from a place of like self-love. Like, I know how to do that with food, and I know what that feels like. What I haven't experienced yet fully is, what does it feel like to be feeding off of light purely? And if this whole life thing is an experiment, which I believe it is, and a game that we came to play and have maximum fun with, then really it's just a choice of like, do you want to experience that part of the process? Because it's available to you. What it will take, though, is essentially deconditioning your body from the story that it has, that it needs food. Because that's a really deep-rooted story, and that's in my biology. Like, that's hardwired into my system. And so my ceremony was largely about overriding this primal response pattern of like, need, feed me, give me something external to make me feel like I'm okay. That's what this boils down to, is, am I okay? Like, needing an external source to tell me that I am, instead of just embodying it and knowing it without a shred of doubt. And so, like a child, Aya showed me in the journey, she showed me this image of like a 2-year-old waking up from a nightmare, startled, and calling out for his parents, like needing that you're okay, I got you. And how beautiful that is, and how important that is, and how eventually that is also no longer necessary, right? You're not calling out for your parents when you're 35 years old and you wake up from a nightmare. At some point, that there's a new stage of evolution that's available to you, and we have that as a collective. Right now, we have the option to claim that level of sovereignty. And what that looks like is overriding the physical response in our body that says, oh my God, if you don't feed me, I'm gonna die. And I had to live through that fear. And I went through it over and over and over again. It was like the fear would kick in, my body would scream for attention, I would choose to override, it would lessen for a moment, and then it would kick in again. And that went on for hours. And at some point, it was just like this choice point. It's like, are you willing to let go of this story that you need anything external? And that morning, once I moved through a bulk of that resistance, I watched the sunrise, and I just practiced like taking in the sunlight through my third eye. And I had 3 blueberries in my hand, or 4 blueberries in my hand. And I was really sitting with like, do I actually want these right now? Does my body actually want these? Or is this just like, well, the sun is rising, it's time to eat breakfast. And getting so honest with ourselves, and getting so refined in our ability to discern between what is our higher self, what is our body, what is our programming, what is our addiction, who's actually calling the shots here, right? And to bring it back to money, and to bring it back to this concept of no such thing as free, if we can see that there would be no apple, there would be no tree, there would be no you, without energy coming together, masculine, feminine, to create something, then suddenly, in an instant, our relationship to money changes. And we recognize that money is a tool. So in personal transformation specifically, and I don't know how many of you are in that space, but if you are, like, this is such a key component. Like, the amount that someone invests into the work with you, let's say you're the practitioner and you want someone to invest into working with you, the amount that they invest is going to, that amount of energy of money is going to act like a wave, like a wave carrying a surfer to shore. So if shore is the goal where they'd like to end up, and they're out on the surfboard, then literally the amount they're willing to invest is going to determine the speed and the amount of joy with which they get there. And so a lot of times that initial choice point, right, to invest in oneself, first of all, that exists outside of the narrative of our collective. People will take out ridiculous loans and go crazy into debt for college. That's normal. We've accepted that. Like, oh yeah, that's normal. It's normal to come out of, to graduate college and to have $50,000 of debt. normal. People do that. So we don't question that. But when it's time to invest in our personal growth, in ourselves, in our truth, and cultivating our truth, and knowing our truth, and embodying our truth, there's no part of our society that says, that endorses that and says that's okay, which is why it's so scary. And also, that's another component, is like, we want the amount, I want the amount that I'm charging someone to work with me to trigger their fear, because that's exactly the thing that they came to me to work through. They want to see their fear so they can move through it. So the best way to do that is just to trigger it right off the bat and bring it all up to the surface. And then we can work with it, and we can play with it, and we can transmute it. So I have, I've gone deep into that subject of specifically that conversation between prospective client and coach or practitioner of some kind, and that's part of an offering that I am literally launching just basically for you guys, and it's brand new for me. I'm just looking at some of these comments. Yeah, it's new for me to relate to money in this way too, because for a long time when I was on the spiritual path, I related to money as something that I wanted to bring into my container and then circulate right back out. And so large sums of money were coming in, but nothing ever stuck. Everything just kind of like flew back out right away. And so the next level for me is really like the willingness to step further into that sacred steward role, and to also allow the value and the content that I've provided already to continue to spread out into the world, and to continue to give people the opportunity to transmute their relationship to money without me necessarily needing to be personally available to sit in front of them or to show up on a call. So that I can go and spread my light and create my content and make my magic all over the world, while my information is still being spread and people are still receiving that learning. So if there's no questions, it doesn't look like there's any questions. We just have people sharing some of their experiences, which I love. Yeah, the grain thing, so intense. Beautiful. Yeah, so essentially I wanted to kind of collect everything that I've talked about, because I've talked about money for a few years now, and I wanted to collect it all. And I wanted to put it all in one place where people could access it and just start to move through the bulk of that information on their own time. And so there's an offering, a package called Money Medicine that I've put together that I have not shared with the world. And I've been building my personal website, rebuilding the whole thing. And it's actually not officially live yet. But because you guys are here on this call, I'm going to be sharing with you the link so you can check out the site. It's not complete. You'll see it's still a little bit in the works, but it's good enough for now. And see if this resonates with you, because I really wanted to just kind of like put together everything I've learned and put it all in one place and just be like, here it is. Now you got it. You got the codes, do with it what you will. That felt really good to me. So I'll share the link here in the chat. It's Azria.com money medicine. And again, I'm not sharing this outside of this container right now. I'm sharing it just with you guys to get first dibs. And there's 3 opportunities. There's 3 different price points. I like giving people choice because everyone relates to money differently and everyone has a different money story. And to Michael, $33 might be a huge stretch. And to Laura, $111 is the perfect amount. I'm giving people a range to play with, and I've been experimenting with that, and I've found that has been really beautiful to give people choice. I like when people give me choice. I think that love is actually the thing that enables choice. And so, yeah, you can check that out. And I think Rachel asked the question, when we are in a low point of scarcity mentality, knowing that we attract what we are, how do we pull ourselves out of that? Great question. Well, it's a recognition that the low point is exactly what you need to experience in order to get to the opposite of that. So if my intention is to make $1 million and I look at my bank account and I see $0, And I'm like, but my intention was to make $1 million. Like, how come I have $0? I've been this person, by the way. Like, what is happening? Then the recognition is that it was the intention of making $1 million that created the circumstance of me having $0, so that everything I'm experiencing when I have $0 can come to the surface, because that's the thing that's blocking me from having $1 million. That stuff, that energetic stuff, those belief systems, those fears, the contraction that you might experience when you're in a scarcity low point is the healing that must happen on the way to wherever you want to go. So it's not, we can so easily get into this trap of feeling like, oh, I need to get away from here. I need to get into abundance mindset. Like, screw the scarcity thing. I need to be in abundance mindset. And yet your whole system is like scarcity, scarcity, scarcity. Well, it's showing you where your work is. It's showing you what wants to be transmuted. It's giving you exactly what you're asking for, just not in the way that you thought it would or in the way that you wanted it to. So really, that's a huge piece. And then another piece is focusing on the abundance in your life that is already there. There's an abundance of air for you to breathe. When you look at your fridge, there's probably an abundance of food options. When you look at your toes, you have an abundance of toes, hopefully. You know, when you walk outside, there's an abundance of trees and leaves, and starting to redirect your focus and your attention to all the abundance that's already there, because that's actually what is real, is abundance. And starting to just shift into what does it feel like to notice that and to allow that to be true. And that, the combination of those two things, and then of course anything that's coming up for you in terms of like deep rooted fear or all the stuff that comes with scarcity consciousness, which is so deep. It's like those are the parts of you that are coming forward to be healed and to be loved, not to be kicked to the curb and told you're not good enough, you can't come on the journey, but to be embraced like a child, you know, like, hey, I got you. You're going to be okay. And so this is ultimately, it all boils back down to self-love. Rachel, I made you cry. I hope in a good way. Thanks for sharing. Beautiful. Well, I think that's it. I wanted to, I just wanted to give a quick burst and download this information. And again, if you are interested in the offering, you can find it. The link is in the thing. Thank you for being here and for saying yes to this journey and listening, and keep rocking it, whatever you're doing. I just know it's good shit. So keep doing it. Love you guys.